The young girl stepped off the plane with her small suitcase, feeling the heavy weight of excitement and nervousness at the same time. She was only 12, and yet she had traveled across the ocean from Japan to the United States, carrying her dreams in a worn-out music bag. Every step on the airport floor seemed louder than it really was, as if the echoes were reminding her that she was far from home. The air smelled different here, cleaner and sharper, and she could hear people talking fast in a language that sounded familiar from movies but still strange in reality. She clutched her bag closer, feeling a mix of wonder and fear. The hotel was tall and grand, with doors that opened automatically and lights that glowed warmly. The girl's eyes grew wide as she took in the lobby, the marble floors and the chandeliers. Everything seemed so big, so shiny, and for a moment she felt like a small dot in a giant world. She tried not to let it scare her. She reminded herself that she was here for a purpose, to play music, to show what she could do, and to make her family proud. Her parents had saved for years to send her to this competition, believing in her talent even when others had not noticed it. The next morning, the competition hall was buzzing with people. Contestants were walking around, some in stylish dresses, others with neat suits. Some carried shiny, expensive piano bags, while others had old ones like hers. The girl felt a twinge of doubt when she saw them, their confident smiles and polished appearances. She looked down at her worn shoes and the simple bag she carried. She took a deep breath and reminded herself that appearances didn't matter. The piano would listen to her hands, not her clothes. As she waited for her turn, she noticed judges seated in the front row. They were serious, with pens and notes in front of them, and some whispered to each other. She felt their eyes glance at her once or twice and saw subtle smiles that did not reach their eyes. She tried not to feel discouraged. Deep down, she knew that music was her voice and the piano was her way to speak to the world. Nothing else mattered in that moment. Other contestants were practicing in the corners, their fingers moving swiftly over keys, producing melodies that were both impressive and intimidating. The girl found a small, empty piano and began to stretch her fingers, pressing soft notes gently. Her heart beat fast, but her mind stayed focused. She remembered the long hours she had spent practicing at home, the early mornings and late nights when her fingers had ached and her eyes had burned from reading music sheets. All those moments were preparing her for this day. She whispered a small prayer, hoping that she could show what she had learned. When her name was finally called, the room felt different. All the noise seemed to fade, and a quiet tension hung in the air. She walked toward the grand piano in the center of the stage, each step feeling heavier and lighter at the same time. The audience looked at her curiously, some with interest, others with polite smiles. The judges leaned back slightly, some with raised eyebrows, some with small smirks. She felt a tiny lump of fear, but she quickly swallowed it down. She reminded herself, music is stronger than fear. Sitting at the piano, she adjusted the bench and looked at the keys. They were smooth and shiny, waiting for her touch. She took a deep breath and laid her hands gently on the keys, feeling the familiar coldness under her fingers. For a moment, everything stopped. The audience, the judges, the room itself, it all seemed to pause and hold its breath. She closed her eyes and remembered the first piece she had ever played, the first time her fingers had found a song, the first time she had felt music flow through her. That memory brought a small smile to her face. She was ready. The first note she played was soft and gentle, almost like a whisper. A few people in the audience turned their heads, surprised at the delicacy of the sound. She could feel the vibration of the piano beneath her fingers, a comforting sensation that made her forget the nervousness and the eyes upon her. She moved to the next note, and then the next, gradually building a melody that filled the hall. The music was not just notes on a page. It was a story, her story. Every rise and fall, every gentle pause spoke of her journey, her struggles, her dreams. As the music flowed, she noticed the subtle shift in the room. The judges stopped their whispers, their pens hovering above the paper. Some audience members leaned forward, their curiosity turning into awe. The melody was simple yet beautiful. It carried the innocence of a child, the depth of someone who had spent countless hours perfecting every movement, and the emotion of someone who truly loved music. The girl's fingers danced lightly over the keys, yet every note was precise, intentional, full of feeling. She did not look at the audience. She did not look at the judges. She closed her eyes completely, letting her heart guide her hands. Memories of her small music room in Japan came to her. The tiny lamp on the desk, the family photos on the wall, the encouragement of her teachers and parents. All of it fueled her playing, and the room could feel it. The notes carried a warmth and sincerity that could not be faked. Even the air seemed to hum with her music, wrapping the audience in a cocoon of sound. Time passed without her noticing. One piece flowed into another, each more challenging than the last, yet her hands moved with grace and confidence. The judges were no longer smirking or whispering. They sat upright, their faces showing a mixture of surprise and admiration. The girl was not just playing the piano. She was commanding it, telling it to sing, to cry, to laugh, and the piano obeyed. When she finally played the last note, it lingered in the air, vibrating with emotion. The room stayed quiet for a moment, as if no one dared to breathe and break the spell she had created. Then slowly the audience began to clap, at first softly, then louder and louder. Some stood up, their eyes wide with amazement. The judges put down their pens, their expressions shifting from doubt to admiration. They had seen something extraordinary, something that went beyond age, appearance, or expectations. The girl lowered her hands and opened her eyes. She looked at the audience and judges, feeling a mix of relief, pride, and disbelief. She had done it. She had shared her music with the world, and it had been heard. She gave a small, humble bow, acknowledging the applause, but inside her heart was soaring. She had come all this way, faced the doubts and laughter, and had let her music speak for her. And in that moment she realized that the journey was just beginning. Backstage, she felt her hands tremble slightly from the effort, but also from excitement. She knew that this was only the first step. There would be more competitions, more performances, more people who might doubt her, but now she also knew that she had the power to change their minds, not with words but with her music. The applause and the silence had taught her that talent, courage, and heart could move people in ways nothing else could. As she walked out of the hall, people came up to her, smiling and congratulating her. Some had tears in their eyes, saying they had never heard anything so beautiful. She thanked them quietly, her cheeks turning pink. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mixture of pride and humility. She knew she was still young, still learning, still growing, but she also knew that she had something special, something that could touch hearts, break barriers, and silence doubt. That night she sat in her hotel room, looking at the city lights outside. The day had been long, exhausting, and thrilling all at once. She opened her music bag and took out her favorite sheet music, flipping through the pages. Each song reminded her of where she had come from, of the long hours of practice, of the sacrifices her family had made. She felt a deep sense of gratitude and determination. Tomorrow would bring another day, another chance to play, another audience to touch. But tonight, she let herself savor the feeling of having stepped onto a stage, having faced the unknown, and having let her heart guide her fingers. And she knew without a doubt that this was only the beginning of a story that would reach far beyond the walls of any hall. A story written in music and courage, one note at a time. The next morning the girl woke up early, even before the sun had fully risen. Her body ached slightly from the long day before, but her mind was full of excitement and determination. She had made her first impression, but she knew the real challenge was still ahead. Today she would perform in front of a larger audience, and she had to be ready. She quietly ate breakfast, careful not to disturb the other contestants, many of whom were talking loudly about their previous performances and plans for the day. She listened to the foreign language being spoken around her, catching a few words she recognized, but mostly letting her mind focus on the music she would play. When she arrived at the competition hall, she saw the room filling up quickly. People from different cities, different countries, and different cultures were all gathered to witness the performances. The girl felt a small flutter of nervousness. Some of the contestants were laughing and joking with each other, their confidence showing in every movement. A few judges were already in their seats, scribbling notes, talking quietly to each other, and glancing at the new arrivals. She could feel their eyes on her once again, noting her quiet demeanor and simple appearance. The atmosphere was different today. The audience seemed more expectant, more eager for entertainment, and the contestants seemed more competitive. She could hear whispers and small laughs from a corner of the room. Some people were underestimating her again, thinking that a small girl from a faraway country could not compete with the polished, trained musicians around her. She felt the weight of those doubts pressing down on her, but she also felt something else, determination. She knew that she could prove herself not by arguing, but by playing the piano better than anyone else. Backstage, she prepared for her performance. She stretched her fingers carefully, warming up each hand slowly. Her breathing was steady, controlled as she mentally reviewed the notes and passages she would play. She could hear other contestants warming up, some hitting keys sharply, others softly, but none with the same calm concentration she felt. She realized that many were trying to impress the audience with speed and strength, while she wanted to speak to them through emotion and understanding. Music was not just a competition for her. It was a message, a way to show who she was. When her name was called, she walked toward the stage slowly, her steps measured and careful. The audience watched her with mild curiosity, some expecting another quiet, simple performance. The judges exchanged glances, a few of them smirking, some whispering jokes under their breath. She felt a small tightening in her chest, but she forced herself to remain calm. She reminded herself that she had worked for years for this moment. The opinions of others could not shake her focus. The piano waited for her, and she would not disappoint it. Sitting at the grand piano, she adjusted the bench and touched the keys gently, feeling their cool, smooth surface. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself sink into the music before even playing a note. The world around her seemed to disappear, leaving only her, the piano, and the melody she wanted to create. She took a deep breath and began. The first notes were soft and careful, like a gentle introduction to a story. Some in the audience tilted their heads, surprised at the delicacy of her playing. She did not rush, allowing the music to breathe, letting each note find its own place in the hall. As she moved into the main part of the piece, her confidence grew. Her fingers moved more fluidly, her hands dancing over the keys with a grace that seemed effortless. She played not just the notes on the sheet, but the emotion behind them. Each chord carried weight. Each melody spoke of longing, hope, and determination. The judges' expressions began to change. The smirks faded, replaced by raised eyebrows and focused attention. The audience leaned forward, drawn into the music as if it were a story being told just to them. Halfway through her performance, she faced a particularly difficult passage. The notes were fast and intricate, requiring both strength and precision. Many young musicians might have panicked or played mechanically, but she approached it with calmness. She had practiced this section hundreds of times, and her hands knew what to do without thinking. As the passage flowed perfectly, she noticed the subtle reactions around her. Some judges exchanged astonished glances, whispering quietly to each other. A few audience members held their breath, unable to take their eyes off her fingers as they moved gracefully over the keys. The girl did not let herself get distracted by the reactions. She kept her eyes closed, letting her heart guide her hands. Music had always been her refuge, her voice, and her way to communicate what words could not. Every note she played carried her story, her dedication, and her love for the piano. The audience could feel it. Even those who had doubted her were now captivated. They could not look away. Her music was no longer just sound. It was a living, breathing presence in the room. As she approached the climax of the piece, the room felt electric. Every note was deliberate, full of intention and feeling. She could sense the energy of the audience, the tension of the judges, and the curiosity of the other contestants. She poured all her focus into her performance, ensuring that every crescendo, every pause, every delicate moment reached its full potential. The music soared, filling the hall with a richness that seemed to touch every listener. When the final notes rang out, they did not just fade, they lingered, vibrating in the air, as if reluctant to leave. The room was completely silent for a heartbeat, caught in the aftermath of what they had just witnessed. Then slowly the applause began. At first it was hesitant, almost tentative, as if people were unsure if what they heard was real. But soon the clapping grew louder, stronger, until the entire hall was filled with cheering and applause. Some people stood, moved to their feet, unable to contain their amazement. The judges were silent, stunned, a few shaking their heads in disbelief. The girl bowed humbly, feeling her cheeks warm. She had expected applause, but not this intensity, not this sudden wave of recognition. She realized that she had touched people in a way she had never imagined. The laughter and doubt from earlier moments had vanished completely. The room, which had once seemed intimidating and critical, now acknowledged her talent openly and fully. She felt a mix of relief, pride, and joy. This was what she had worked for, what she had dreamed about, and she had achieved it with nothing but her music and determination. Backstage, She was met with congratulations from other contestants and teachers. Some of them were amazed that such a quiet, small girl could play with such power and emotion. She thanked them politely, feeling a deep sense of humility. She knew that talent was not just about playing fast or loud. It was about feeling, understanding, and connecting with the music. Her performance had proven that to herself and to everyone else in the room. That evening, she returned to her hotel room, exhausted but exhilarated. She took out her sheet music and carefully reviewed the pieces she had played, making small notes to improve for future performances. Her fingers ached slightly, but it was a satisfying kind of ache, the kind that comes from doing something you love and giving it your all. She thought about the reactions of the judges, the applause of the audience, and the faces of other contestants. She realized that she had not just played music, she had communicated something deeply human, something that transcended language and culture. As she looked out at the city lights through the hotel window, she felt a quiet determination growing inside her. Tomorrow would bring more challenges, more performances, and perhaps more doubt from others. But she knew that she now had the confidence and experience to face them. She had learned that talent, preparation, and courage could overcome fear, doubt, and laughter. She held her music close, ready to continue her journey, knowing that each performance was not just about winning, but about sharing a piece of her heart with the world. She closed her eyes and let herself rest, imagining the next performance, the next challenge, and the next audience. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she was ready. She had seen how powerful her music could be, how it could change perceptions and touch hearts, and she knew that no matter what happened next, she would always play with honesty, emotion, and courage, letting the piano speak for her in ways words never could. The day of the main competition arrived, and the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. The hall was even larger than she had imagined, filled with rows of seats stretching back, all occupied by eager spectators. Contestants were preparing everywhere, adjusting their outfits, checking their sheet music, and testing the pianos in the corner. The girl felt her heart race, but she reminded herself that the music had always been her anchor. No matter how grand the hall or how critical the judges, her connection to the piano was what mattered most. She watched other contestants perform briefly, their playing polished but mechanical. Some relied on speed and loud notes to impress the crowd, while others tried dramatic gestures. She noticed that many of them seemed more concerned about appearances than music. That only strengthened her resolve. She knew that the power of a melody came from emotion, not flash. She practiced a few quiet notes at her own piano, letting her fingers remember their movements, letting the music settle in her mind before stepping onto the stage. When her name was called, she walked calmly, yet each step carried weight. The audience turned to look, some curious, some skeptical. She could feel eyes studying her, noting her small frame and modest attire. The judges, too, seemed to exchange subtle smirks, perhaps expecting another shy, simple performance. She felt a brief sting of discomfort, but she pushed it aside. She did not need validation from others. Her music would do the talking. Sitting at the grand piano, she took a deep breath and let her hands hover over the keys. She closed her eyes and remembered the countless hours she had spent practicing at home in Japan, the lessons, the late-night repetitions, the encouragement from her family. All those memories gave her courage. She pressed the first key gently, and the note echoed softly through the hall. It was a simple sound, but it held intention, care, and a quiet confidence. The first few measures were delicate, almost a whisper of a story. The audience leaned in, noticing the precision and emotion in each note. Some of the judges raised their eyebrows, pausing their note-taking. She could feel the shift, even if it was subtle. The hall, which had moments ago been full of chatter and expectation, now seemed to quiet down, drawn into the music she created. Her fingers moved lightly but purposefully, coaxing melodies from the piano with skill and care. As the piece progressed, she moved into faster passages, intricate patterns that demanded both speed and accuracy. Her hands moved fluidly, each note clear and distinct. The audience was captivated. Some held their breath, sensing the beauty unfolding before them. The judges leaned forward, a mixture of disbelief and admiration on their faces. She played not for them, but for the music itself, letting it flow naturally, guided by her heart. Every note carried emotion, every chord had intention, and the melody began to resonate deeply with everyone in the hall. Midway through the piece, she faced a particularly difficult section, full of rapid scales and complex harmonies. Many performers might have tensed, their fingers fumbling under pressure. But she remained calm, her fingers moving as if they had a life of their own. Years of practice had trained her hands and mind to work as one. Each note was executed with precision, each movement intentional. The audience could sense the mastery behind every sound, even without understanding the technicalities. Her performance was not just skill. It was storytelling. She noticed small changes in the room. Some spectators whispered in awe while others simply watched, unable to blink, as if afraid to miss a single moment. The judges were completely focused now, their previous amusement replaced by genuine attention. The girl did not look at them. She did not need their approval. Her eyes remained closed, lost in the music, feeling every rise and fall, every soft and loud passage, as if the piano itself were speaking to her. As the music reached its emotional peak, the hall felt alive with energy. Her hands moved with both strength and delicacy, creating a balance that seemed impossible. Each chord struck with purpose, each melody intertwined perfectly with the next. She played with emotion, letting her feelings flow through the keys, painting pictures in the minds of those listening. She felt the weight of the moment, yet also a sense of freedom, as if she and the piano were one entity sharing a message with the world. When she reached the final notes, she slowed slightly, allowing each chord to linger, to resonate fully. The audience felt the impact of every sound, every pause. The last note rang out clear and perfect, then faded naturally, leaving a profound silence. The room was frozen, everyone caught in the aftermath of what they had just witnessed. It was not just a performance. It was an experience, something that touched hearts and minds beyond the technicalities of music. Then, slowly, the applause began. At first a soft ripple, then a wave that grew louder and louder. People stood, some with tears in their eyes, some clapping so hard their hands stung. The judges looked stunned, exchanging glances as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. They had underestimated her, judged her by appearance, by the quiet demeanor of a small girl from a distant country. And now all their doubts were silenced by the undeniable brilliance of her performance. She lowered her hands, feeling her heart race with a mix of relief and exhilaration. She gave a small, humble bow, acknowledging the audience without letting the applause overwhelm her. Backstage, other contestants and teachers came to her, their faces full of admiration and surprise. They praised her technique, her emotion, and her presence on stage. She thanked them quietly, feeling both proud and modest. She knew that what she had done was extraordinary, but she also knew that she was still learning, still growing, still finding new ways to express herself through the piano. After the performance, she sat in a quiet corner reflecting on the moment. The applause, the astonishment, the emotional connection with the audience, all of it felt incredible. But what mattered most to her was the realization that music had the power to break barriers, to speak to people without words, and to connect hearts across cultures and languages. She had experienced that firsthand, and it filled her with a quiet joy and determination. That evening in her hotel room, she carefully reviewed the music she had played. She noted the parts she had done well and the sections she could improve for future performances. Her fingers ached, but it was a satisfying ache, the kind that comes from doing something deeply meaningful. She thought about the reactions of the judges, the audience, and her fellow contestants. She realized that the journey was not just about winning or recognition. It was about sharing a piece of herself, her heart, and her dedication with the world. She looked out the window at the city lights, feeling small yet determined. Tomorrow would bring another day, another stage, another audience, and perhaps more doubts and challenges. But she knew that her music had power, and she had the courage to continue. She would keep practicing, keep learning, and keep sharing her story through her fingers on the piano. Each performance was a step forward, a chance to touch more hearts, to silence more doubts, and to grow not only as a musician but as a human being. As she closed her eyes, she imagined the next performance, the next melody, the next chance to express herself. She felt calm and ready, knowing that no matter what lay ahead, she could face it with her music. The piano had always been her companion, her voice, and her guide. And now in this foreign country, surrounded by strangers who had once doubted her, it had proven that true talent and dedication could transcend every barrier. She drifted to sleep with a quiet confidence, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The next day, the girl arrived at the hall earlier than usual. She wanted time to prepare her mind and calm her nerves. The air was full of excitement and tension. Contestants walked back and forth, practicing their pieces one last time, adjusting their dresses or whispering strategies to each other. The girl found a quiet corner and stretched her fingers slowly. Taking deep breaths, she reminded herself that her music was her strength, not the opinion of others, not the size of the stage, and not the grandeur of the hall. She could hear the soft sounds of other performers testing their pianos. Some played loud and fast, trying to catch the attention of anyone listening. She watched them for a moment but quickly turned back to her own quiet preparation. Her heart pounded with anticipation, but she focused on the music inside her head. She ran her fingers lightly over the keys, imagining the notes she would play, letting the melodies settle in her mind. When her name was called, she walked to the stage with her small, steady steps. The audience looked at her with curiosity. Some whispers reached her ears, small doubts about whether this quiet girl could match the energy of the other performers. She ignored it. She knew that the piano would respond to her feelings and not the expectations of the crowd. She took her seat and adjusted the bench, her hands hovering over the keys for a brief moment of calm. She closed her eyes and let the music fill her mind before she began. The first notes were gentle, almost shy but full of intention. The hall seemed to listen, the chatter fading into silence. The audience leaned forward, sensing something special. Her fingers moved with both precision and grace. Each note was clear and full of emotion. The judges, who had once doubted her, leaned in, watching carefully. The smirks of the past had disappeared. Now there was only attention, curiosity, and a growing sense of respect. She played a melody that rose and fell like waves on the sea. The quiet parts were soft and tender, the loud parts strong and confident. She let herself feel the music, letting it guide her fingers. The audience could sense it too. Some people closed their eyes, letting the sound move through them. The judges were silent, completely absorbed in the performance. Even the other contestants stopped practicing, listening in awe. As she reached a particularly complex section, her fingers moved faster, yet with control. Every note was deliberate, every chord carefully shaped. The hall felt like it had become part of her music. She was not playing for applause or for validation. She was playing to express herself, to tell a story only the piano could share. The audience could feel the sincerity in her playing. Their emotions mirrored hers, moving with the rise and fall of each melody. She noticed the small changes in the room. Some spectators had tears in their eyes, others held their breath. The judges scribbled notes, but their faces showed astonishment and admiration. Her music was breaking through expectations, silencing doubts and creating an emotional connection that words could not capture. She smiled slightly, knowing that her heart and hands were speaking in harmony. This was why she had practiced so hard, why she had traveled so far. The piano had become her voice, and everyone was listening. As the piece moved toward the climax, she played with all her emotion. The notes soared, powerful yet gentle, dramatic yet tender. The audience could feel the story within each chord, each passage carrying meaning beyond the written music. She poured everything she had into those final moments, feeling the energy of the room and channeling it through her fingers. She was no longer just a performer. She was a storyteller, a bridge between her music and the hearts of everyone listening. The last notes rang out, long and clear, filling the hall with resonance. The silence that followed was intense. No one moved. No one breathed too loudly, as if they were afraid to disturb the lingering emotion. The girl lowered her hands slowly, her eyes still closed for a moment. She felt the weight of the moment, the power of what she had shared. Then the hall erupted into applause. People rose to their feet, cheering, clapping, and some even wiping tears from their eyes. The judges were amazed, their previous skepticism replaced with admiration and respect. She bowed, humbly acknowledging the audience and judges. She felt a warmth in her chest, a mix of pride and gratitude. Backstage, other contestants and teachers congratulated her, their faces full of wonder. Some asked how she could play with such emotion and skill at such a young age. She smiled quietly, knowing that it was not about age, but about dedication, love for music, and the courage to share herself without fear. That night, she returned to her hotel room exhausted but happy. She reviewed the pieces she had played, noting areas to improve but also savoring the feeling of success. Her fingers ached pleasantly from the effort, a reminder of the hours she had devoted to practice. She thought about the reactions of the audience and judges, realizing that she had touched people in ways that went beyond performance or competition. Music had the power to connect hearts, and she had experienced it firsthand. Looking out the window at the city lights, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She remembered the moments of doubt, the laughter, the long hours of practice, and the quiet determination that had guided her. She knew that there would be more challenges ahead, more stages, more people who might underestimate her, but she also knew that she had the power to face them with courage, skill, and her love for music. Each performance was not just a chance to show talent, but an opportunity to share her story, to inspire others, and to grow as a musician and a person. As she closed her eyes to sleep, she felt a sense of peace and readiness. The day had been intense, emotional, and extraordinary. She had played not only with her fingers but with her heart, and it had been heard. Tomorrow would bring new opportunities, but tonight she rested with the satisfaction of having shared a piece of herself with the world, knowing that her music had touched lives and silenced doubts, if only for a moment. The journey continued, and she was ready to follow it wherever it led, one note at a time. The morning of the final round arrived with an energy that felt almost tangible. The girl woke up early as usual, her body alert even before the sun had fully risen. Today was different. The stakes were higher, the audience larger, and the competition fiercer. Contestants moved about quickly, checking their sheet music, practicing small passages, and exchanging last-minute strategies. The girl, however, focused on her breathing and her hands. She reminded herself that the piano had always been her companion, her voice, and her way to communicate what words could not. Today, she would let that voice speak louder than ever. Arriving at the hall, she noticed the crowd had grown even larger. Seats were full, with people leaning forward, their faces eager to witness the final performances. She could hear whispers about the young Japanese girl who had impressed everyone in the earlier rounds. Some expressed doubt, wondering if she could replicate her previous brilliance. Others were excited, curious to see how someone so young and humble could command the piano so powerfully. The girl felt a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. She took a deep breath, trying to focus entirely on the music inside her. Backstage, she quietly ran her fingers over the keys, imagining the melodies she would play. Other contestants were making noise, chatting, and testing pianos loudly, trying to assert their presence. She remained calm, letting the quietness of her preparation contrast with the chaos around her. She remembered the countless hours spent practicing at home, the late nights, the early mornings, the moments when her fingers ached and her eyes burned from reading sheet music. Every bit of effort had led to this moment. She reminded herself that her music, not appearances or showmanship, would be her strength. When her name was announced, she walked toward the stage, her small frame carrying immense confidence. The audience turned to look, curiosity and expectation filling the room. The judges were poised, pens ready, but their expressions were unreadable. She could sense their judgment, their subtle expectations. She ignored it all. She did not need approval or applause. She only needed to let the music flow through her, to let the piano sing her story. Sitting at the grand piano, she took a deep breath and let her fingers hover above the keys. She closed her eyes, recalling the melodies, the hours of practice, the emotions she wanted to convey. Then gently she pressed the first key. The sound was soft but deliberate, resonating with clarity and intention. The hall seemed quiet, the anticipation of the audience giving way to focus. Every note she played was a reflection of her heart, a small but powerful message that transcended language, culture, and expectation. Her hands moved with precision and grace, weaving through complex patterns and intricate harmonies. The audience could feel the depth of her understanding, the connection between her mind, heart, and fingers. The judges, who had once underestimated her, now leaned forward, scribbling notes with a mixture of astonishment and admiration. The music carried emotion, joy, longing, determination, and hope. Every passage she played told a story, one that was felt more than heard. Halfway through the performance, she reached a section that demanded both technical skill and emotional depth. Many performers might have felt tension or panic, but she remained calm. Her fingers moved confidently, each note precise and expressive. The audience leaned forward, captivated, sensing the power and sincerity behind every chord. Even the judges, who had heard countless performances in their careers, seemed unable to look away. The piano was no longer just an instrument. It was a vessel for her heart, and everyone in the hall could feel it. As the piece approached its climax, The music soared. She played with strength and delicacy, creating a dynamic range that mesmerized the listeners. The melodies intertwined perfectly, each note carrying weight and emotion. She was completely immersed, eyes closed, heart open, letting the piano become an extension of herself. The audience was spellbound. Some held back tears, some gasped softly, and some simply sat in awe. The room seemed to vibrate with the power of her music, every chord echoing long after it was played. The final passage demanded all her concentration, control, and passion. Her fingers moved swiftly yet gracefully, dancing over the keys with confidence. She poured every ounce of her emotion into the performance, letting it resonate through the hall. The notes rose and fell, creating waves of sound that enveloped the audience. She could feel the energy in the room, feeding into her playing, turning her performance into a shared experience between her and everyone listening. Finally, she played the last chord. It was deliberate, full, and lingering, holding the attention of everyone in the hall. The silence that followed was profound. The audience sat in stunned reverence, unable to believe the beauty and mastery they had just witnessed. The judges were completely silent, pens down, their faces a mixture of awe and admiration. They had doubted her, laughed quietly, and underestimated her. Now their doubts were completely silenced by the undeniable power of her talent. Then the applause erupted, at first soft, then growing into a thunderous wave. People stood, clapping, cheering, some even crying, moved by the performance. The girl lowered her hands slowly, a small, humble bow acknowledging the ovation. She felt her chest swell with pride and gratitude. Backstage, other contestants and teachers came to her, congratulating her with expressions of astonishment and respect. She thanked them quietly, feeling both proud and modest. She knew that what she had done was extraordinary, but she also knew that she had more to learn and more to share. That evening, she returned to her hotel room, her body tired, but her mind alive with reflection. She reviewed the pieces she had played, thinking of what went well and what could be improved. Her fingers ached pleasantly, a reminder of the dedication and effort that had brought her here. She thought of the audience, the judges, and the other contestants, realizing that she had shared something far more valuable than notes on a page. She had shared her heart, her determination, and her love for music, connecting with everyone in a way that transcended words. Looking out at the city lights, she felt a sense of accomplishment mixed with quiet determination. Tomorrow might bring recognition, awards, or even new challenges. But she knew that her music had already made an impact, and that was more important than any prize. She had learned that talent, courage, and heart could overcome doubt and judgment. Her music had the power to touch lives, to inspire, and to speak in ways words could never achieve. As she closed her eyes that night, she imagined the next steps of her journey, the next melodies she would play, and the next audience she would touch. She felt calm and ready, confident in her abilities and in the connection she could create through music. She had faced doubt, laughter, and skepticism, and had emerged stronger and more determined. The piano was her voice, and she would continue to let it speak, sharing her story one note at a time, inspiring hearts and silencing doubts wherever she went. The day after the final performance began with a quiet sense of accomplishment. The girl woke up feeling a mixture of exhaustion and excitement. The applause from the previous day still echoed in her mind, a reminder of the impact her music had made. She dressed simply, careful not to draw attention, but her heart was filled with pride and anticipation. Today was the day when the results would be announced, and she could not deny the nervous flutter in her chest. She reminded herself that no matter the outcome, she had already achieved something extraordinary. She had shared her heart through her music and moved people in ways she had only dreamed of. Arriving at the hall, the atmosphere was electric. People whispered about the young Japanese girl who had captivated everyone with her talent. Contestants moved about nervously, some practicing their final pieces, others trying to appear calm while their eyes betrayed worry. She found a quiet spot to center herself, stretching her fingers gently and taking deep breaths. She let the silence calm her and the memories of her performances fill her mind. Each note she had played, each melody she had shared reminded her that she had already succeeded in ways that could not be measured by scores or awards. When it was time for the announcement, the hall grew silent. The judges entered the room, their expressions serious but with a hint of warmth. The girl took her seat, hands folded in her lap, feeling both nervous and prepared. She could see the audience leaning forward, eager to hear the results. The judges spoke, praising all the contestants for their hard work and dedication. Then the moment came. The lead judge paused, looked around the hall and smiled before announcing the first few awards. There was polite applause, excitement, and a few sighs of disappointment. The girl remained calm, focusing on her breathing and keeping her hands steady. When her name was finally called, it felt as if the room held its breath. The judges praised her extraordinary talent, her emotional depth, and the connection she had made with the audience. They spoke of her precision, her humility, and the unique way she had shared her story through music. The audience erupted into applause, some standing, some clapping with tears in their eyes. She stood slowly, bowing humbly as the cheers washed over her. Her heart swelled with gratitude. She had not only achieved recognition, but had also touched hearts in ways that went beyond awards or rankings. After the ceremony, reporters and photographers surrounded her, eager to hear her story. She spoke softly, expressing gratitude for the opportunity to perform and for the support of her family and teachers. She emphasized that music had always been a way to share feelings that words could not express. Her humility and sincerity impressed everyone, and her story began to spread beyond the hall, through newspapers, social media, and television. People were inspired by a young girl who had traveled far from her home, faced doubt and skepticism, and used her talent and determination to shine brightly. Back in her hotel room that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She thought of the early mornings and late nights of practice, the moments when her fingers had ached, and the times she had felt frustrated but never given up. She remembered the initial doubts, the laughter she had overheard, and the skepticism of the judges in the first rounds. All of it had been a test, not of her talent but of her courage, persistence, and belief in herself. She realized that every challenge she had faced had prepared her for this moment, for the ability to share her music with the world. Her parents called her later that night. They spoke with pride and emotion, praising her dedication and courage. They reminded her that no matter where she went or what she achieved, it was her love for music and her heart that made her special. She listened, feeling warmth and reassurance. Their words strengthened her resolve to continue her journey, not just for recognition but for the joy of sharing music, for the people she could inspire, and for the dreams she still wanted to pursue. The next morning, she practiced quietly, preparing new pieces for upcoming performances. She felt a renewed sense of purpose. The competition had ended, but her journey was far from over. She knew that music was not just a path to awards or fame, but a lifelong journey of growth, expression, and connection. She imagined the audiences she would reach in the future, the hearts she could touch, and the stories she could tell through her music. Each note she played was a step forward, a chance to inspire, to comfort, and to communicate in a language that transcended borders. Days turned into weeks, and invitations arrived from other competitions, concerts, and music schools. She traveled, performed, and shared her story widely. Yet, despite the growing recognition, she remained humble and focused on the essence of music. She continued to practice diligently, understanding that talent alone was not enough. Discipline, passion, and a desire to communicate through music were what truly mattered. She remembered the laughter and doubt she had faced at the beginning of her journey, and it strengthened her commitment to remain sincere, dedicated, and courageous. Every performance became an opportunity to touch lives. She noticed the emotions of the audience, the way some people closed their eyes to feel the music deeply, the way others smiled or cried as the melodies unfolded. Each reaction reminded her of the power of music, the invisible connection it created, and the responsibility she had as a musician. She realized that her talent was a gift, but her dedication and heart made it meaningful. This understanding guided her as she continued to grow, both as a pianist and as a person. She often reflected on the competition in the United States, the moment when judges had laughed, when people had underestimated her, and how her music had silenced doubts and captured hearts. Those memories reminded her that true strength came from belief in oneself, persistence, and the courage to follow a dream despite obstacles. She understood that talent alone would not have been enough. It was her heart, discipline, and love for music that had allowed her to shine. As she matured, her reputation as a pianist grew, but she never let it change her humility. She continued to study, to practice, and to seek new ways to express herself. She collaborated with other musicians, explored new styles, and always approached each piece with sincerity. Her journey had begun with a small piano, a dream, and the determination to prove that music could speak louder than doubt. Now it had evolved into a lifelong pursuit of excellence, expression, and connection. In the quiet moments, she often returned to the simple joy of playing for herself, for the love of music, and for the emotions it could convey. She remembered the faces in the audience, the astonishment of the judges, and the applause that had once seemed overwhelming. Those memories were not just reminders of success. They were reminders of why she had begun, why she had practiced tirelessly, and why she would continue to play with her heart fully open. Her story became known not just for the awards, but for the message it carried that humility, perseverance, and passion could overcome doubt and skepticism, that true talent is revealed through dedication and sincerity, and that music is a language that connects all hearts. People were inspired by her journey, young musicians especially, who saw in her a model of courage and determination. They learned that success is not measured by appearances, wealth, or early recognition, but by the courage to pursue a dream, the patience to master a craft, and the heart to touch others through one's gifts. Years later, she continued to perform around the world, but she never forgot the moment when judges had laughed, when she had faced skepticism, and when her music had silenced the room. Those experiences became a guiding light, reminding her of the importance of humility, persistence, and heart. She remained committed to sharing her music sincerely, to inspiring others, and to expressing the depth of her feelings through the piano. And every time she played, she remembered the journey that had started so humbly, the courage it had required, and the joy of turning doubt into wonder, note by note, melody by melody.